Hey, Staci, welcome to the show.
Hey, Shannon. Thanks for having me.
Of course, say hi to everyone listening and let them know who you are.
Hi, Staci Millard, Fractional CFO, mentor to small businesses, and mama of 2 girls.
Awesome. And for anyone wondering, Shannon, you let another fractional CFO come talk on your show? What are you doing? I don't care. There is no competition. There is only collaboration. Would you agree, Staci?
Oh, yeah. Even the conversation we had before this, it's like there's more than enough for both of us, but I'm so excited for our conversation and for people to maybe hear things differently so that they take initiative.
Yeah, because sometimes, your parents will tell you one thing and then you hear it from your cousin or your friend and you're like, wow, that was amazing. And it's like, I've been telling you that for decades. Why aren't you listening to me? So we're really excited to have you on the show to show some perspective. And could you just talk a little bit about your experience, how you became a fractional CFO and got into this wild world of numbers, just to give some folks some background?
Yeah. So to start with, I'm Canadian. My background as a CPA would have been slightly different than American CPAs, but I started in public practice accounting, working with small businesses. That's where I've been for almost 17 years. And one day I just decided to take the leap. Like a lot of us who are unsatisfied with, working for somebody else and all that comes along with it, I decided to take the leap, open my own practice, grew that to 7 figures and exited about 2 years ago, deciding that I wasn't in love with taxes. I'm totally in love with helping small business owners make more money, but definitely not the tax part, which I absolutely love that you do focus on that because that's necessary as well. Just wasn't mine to keep up on. So now I very much focus on the fractional CFO side and helping small businesses turn a profit and have a business that they love, that they're not killing to work at every day.
Exact same mission. I love it. And so do you serve a particular niche in general, or are you looking at a certain type of client?
I tend to work with service providers. I also own a product-based company, which I didn't mention in my bio, but I just love it all. To be honest, after 17 years of every single industry, I think the one that I love the most that's always so surprising is like working with burly men who get referred and they're like, what do you know? And I'm very much live in a very industrial city. So it's like, I know all of the, heavy metal equipment and all that stuff. And it always surprises them. They're like, who's this girl? So yeah.
I absolutely love it. I love it. So let's just chat for a little bit about what we're seeing right now. Cause I think it's cool that, I get to share, I get a microphone and I get to share my perspective with folks listening, a couple times a week on solo episodes and get to rant about some of this stuff, but it's great to have a friend to banter with on it. And I wanted to talk about some stuff that we're seeing when it comes to investing in a professional, because we were chatting before we hit record a little bit about, the priority of how people are spending money, especially now when money's a little bit tighter, that fractional CFO or even an accountant in general, any type of professional help can be seen as a luxury or nice to have. Are you finding that is kind of a challenge for you as well?
1000%. And, the conversations that I'm having, I'm watching people invest in, big picture strategy. I'm seeing them invest in like coaching that's almost more like life coaching. And I have a, way different perspective, I think, than a lot of people on that, where like I see that as long term. So I'm wondering, when we're investing in those things, like what's your runway? How much cash do you have to continue to invest in that? And what do you think your payoff is going to be, especially on the mindset side? And then when we look at our, for a fractional CFO, I'm like, we literally are focused on making more money so you have more to invest in those things. So it's sort of backwards to me that people are investing in these other things, hoping they fix the problem. And I'm like, but if you're fixing a money problem, don't you go to the money person?
I agree. And I agree that there's value in the coaching side of things, but you made a great point that isn't that a long-term commitment that you're making? And how are you going to ensure that you're able to sustain that type of cash flow hit, over time? And I think that one of the things I always see is that people say, like, I can't hire you yet, right? I can't hire you yet. And it's kind of like that idea of I can't hire the trainer yet until I'm in better shape.
Or like I'll hire the housekeeper once the house is clean. Like,
yeah. It's an interesting thought, because I think that there's a misunderstanding on what we do. So let's unpack that for a second, candidly, because I'll admit it's not always easy to articulate what it is we do, because there's so many different types of results we can get for clients and so many different problems that we truly solve. And a lot of misconceptions, honestly. What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions about what fractional CFOs do or don't do for a small business owner?
I think in general, people just don't know what it is. Like people know that, Fortune 500 companies, publicly listed companies, they've got these CFOs, but it's like almost just like, okay, they, give them some reports and they're nickel and diming things. Most of the confusion is that we're either bookkeepers or, tax accountants. And really, we're not that at all. We are here looking at your numbers, focused on how do we help you streamline your processes? How do we help you bring in more money? That may not even mean more sales. In fact, most of the time it's not. It's figuring out, what to be selling. And beyond that, it's also people think that if they look at the numbers, right, and they stare at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on a sheet or on a report, that it's just that's going to tell them something. But I think for me, at least as a fractional CFO, it's actually about the picture that it paints. Like it's almost like I get some art in my head and I see these graphs or like see how things, relate together. And so it's not just dollars and cents. It's like how that relationship works within your business, with your customers, with your team, with yourself, and being able to use that then to like set a trajectory of like, hey, we should do this if we want things to be easier or better or more profitable.
Yep. You mentioned the full picture of everything. And I think that without a fractional CFO, it's really hard to see the full picture. But I think we're a really cross-functional person in the organization where we can see how the operations, how the people, how the processes, how the fulfillment, everything, how the marketing and sales affect the bottom line and what impact it's having on the business and its mission. And I think that that gets lost in the shuffle in that, like you said, people associate us with the data collection when in reality, it's the direction and the decision making. So instead of collecting data, which is more so the bookkeepers, which again, not minimizing what they do, they are the foundation on which we can stand. And we are grateful as hell for them because they do such a great job. That is key. But I think that without taking the numbers and doing something with them, they're really not that valuable to you.
Yeah. Really, they're other than the fact that you're going to be able to easily file your taxes at the end of the year, it's not providing a lot of value or direction for your business. I think it's interesting. One of the things that a client of mine commented on this last week to me was that she's like, wow, you really think like an entrepreneur. I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, like I grew and scaled my own business. So I am an entrepreneur. But that is, I think, the definition of a fractional CFO is somebody who's really in your business, thinking like you. What's it like to be the manager who's going to have to implement this? What's it like to be the team member underneath? And we are really thinking like we're in your business. We are that entrepreneurial mindset and we're trying to help you expand on that. We're not just the data crunchers like, where's this receipt for your expense report? Like it's a whole different experience.
Exactly. Data has to be on point, but we're going to take that and run with it and talk through all those things. Let's talk through I'm going to start, but as you can kind of think of something, but maybe some challenges we've helped business owners overcome specifically that are outside of the decimal point on the numbers, right? Not the receipt that they had to find or anything like that. But what comes to mind for me is, it's looking at my apparel retailer and helping come up with an ideal order mix of what products and what sizes to order to ensure the most profitability. It might be, looking at the staffing at the restaurant that I serve and looking at staff levels, looking at compensation, looking at employee incentives to help promote more turnover, or not more turnover, less turnover, more retention. We don't want that. More retention in order to keep costs maintained, but also to keep a better customer experience and something more consistent, right? But you think, wait, a CFO looks at all that stuff? At least I do. I look at all those things. I don't solve all the problems because I am not an expert in marketing, sales, or anything like that. But I feel like I can shine a light on this is what you need to focus on. And that's a really, really key aspect of it.
So I love how you said that about marketing, but also like taking it one step further is like, okay, if that's what we decide, but it's not always increased sales. But if that's what we decide is like, hey, we need to have better sales. The other piece behind it is having some targets of like, yes, this is what we can afford to spend. Here is what kind of, rate of return we're going to have to see on this. Is that feasible? If not, then maybe we're using a different tactic, right? So, the platforms are tactics. So it's like, okay, maybe you need to find somebody else who's, instead of working at an upfront price, maybe they're getting a retainer, maybe they're getting a percentage commission. Like there's so many just options that we help you work through so that we're like, hey, we can afford this. We can see results on it. On this, like all the way from a solopreneur, like I think people think, oh, I have to have a big business for this. And like, yeah, construction clients, we're talking about what equipment are you using it? Like you're paying for it every month. So is that something we need to get rid of? And I think that makes sense at a large basis. But for solopreneurs, people are like, oh, do I really need a fractional CFO? And it's like, yes. On a product side, I've helped a client this year who had a candle company. She's like, I'm working my tail off. She thinks she just needs more sales. She's like, why are we going nowhere? Well, these candles, like what you put into them, you're working for less than minimum wage. And I was able to help, on a one-time basis, like give that perspective. The same on a service, provider, where it's like you realize that one of your services is highly, highly profitable. You've never looked into it. And one of them is like, again, you might as well be working at McDonald's. So having somebody come in with that understanding of those numbers and like, okay, let's look at this. We know what strings to pull on to get the answers.
Yeah. And I think part of it is the objective perspective on it. To say, this is what the numbers are telling me. It's not like how you feel or what you enjoy more. And some of the tough love, we were talking about this before, that like sometimes business owners need the tough love of, well, your business isn't here to entertain you. It's here to make money. So this is the path to making that happen. But also that in order to make money, there are certain discomforts, certain things that you're not going to want to do that are good for the business that you'll have to do, or certain priorities to shift in order to make it happen. Specifically, we were talking about, investing in other expenses. We mentioned like in life coaching and things like that, where that became a top priority. But, but there's like other stuff that's totally on fire. You know what I mean? That they can easily pour some money into.
Okay, I have to like stop here just like very briefly. This week, I had somebody on my podcast, and understanding like somatic and how our body is in fight, flight, or regulated really honestly changed my business. It changed how I showed up for my team, I showed up for my clients. So this week, I had somebody on my podcast talking about that. And she said to me that 20% of our like nerve endings go from our brain to our body and 80% from our body to our brain. Now, what this has to do with investment is that you are never going to mindset your way out of a problem. 20% is there. We want the 80%. We want to be doing what's effective. So I don't disagree with mindset work. It has changed my life. It's where I started investing in myself as well. And I think personal development will be something I do every day till I die. But I invest in it differently now, knowing it's like, maybe it's a book or a podcast. Maybe it's a small group, but I'm not investing in that as my way out of actually needing strategy in my business. It also affects how I decide to, invest in strategy. Like, what do I really think I can get back from an investment? If you are going into something and you're like, I'm not really sure what I'm going to get out of this. Like, I don't know, hopefully some sales, or hopefully I'm going to meet people, like, and you're not asking yourself, like, really honestly, do I think that's achievable from this investment? Then you shouldn't be investing in the first place. You have to get those ducks in a row first.
Absolutely. And I'll give some examples too. Like, I've invested in certain opportunities that I've definitely been called crazy for. I invested in a paid podcast opportunity, for example. And it's like, wow, you spent that much money to be on a podcast? And I was like, abso-freaking-lutely. Why? Because 80% of my clients have been obtained from podcast interviews. That is my most effective way of attracting my ideal client. And if I can get my voice heard by more people, that will happen. So I computed a basic ROI on, if I get X clients from that show, it has more than paid for itself. Not to mention the content that gets created from it, or the spreading of the audience, right? So I was very calculated in my investment opportunities, whether that be a direct ROI thing for more customers, or if it's a networking event or a conference or a course or a mastermind or anything. You have to walk into it going, what am I going to take out of this? And what is that worth to me?
Yeah. So like, I love how you break down that ROI, where it's like, okay, this is where I do get my clients, but then that specific investment too, you're looking at like, who is the audience? What are their past conversion rates with selling to the audience? And like you said, really digging into the questions and like almost leaving the emotion out of it. Because honestly, like, I don't know about you, but my emotions change about 100 times a day. Like, I don't trust them. I want to know the numbers.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I acknowledge that depending on how I feel, or what I just read, or who I just talked to, or what's going on, or what time of the month it is, being real,
Yeah.
it will affect how I react to things. And consciously, I'm like, my money should not be behaving on the wave of emotion. It should be behaving on the wave of logic. Like, because you can't get it back when you change your mind. You really can't change what you did with your money.
The weight of those decisions like outlast the emotion, right? The emotion's long gone, but your consequence of whatever you chose, whether it's positive or negative, is going to last a long time.
Yeah, and money is an emotional thing, but I think that people connect it to emotions. They'll spend emotionally, or it's almost like eating. There's emotional eating. I think there's also emotional spending. I mean, how many times have we heard the phrase retail therapy?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's so true. And it's not like Staci said, which she said really articulately, the whole point here is not to discourage you from spending on certain things. We're not here to tell you what to spend money on or not to spend money on. And that is not, I don't even tell my clients what to spend money on or not. I just say, hey, you're doing this. Is that in alignment with your goals? Right? I just want to call attention to whether every dollar being spent is moving in the direction of the goal that they had. And if the goal is changing, that is totally fine. But I think goals are the North Star that we use to kind of anchor back into, well, I understand you want to spend this much money on this thing, but like, how is that contributing toward the goal? And that kind of goes along with the ROI we were talking about. Like, is it going to help you generate more leads, or is it going to help you attract new team members, or how is this going to contribute? Right.
I think that's actually one thing that people maybe are, just not aware of when they go to work with a CFO that actually happens a lot, is like refocusing on the goal. And as entrepreneurs, we are so lit up by like the new project and having an impact, and it's so fun, and the visionary experience, right, of like dreaming up new ideas. So one thing I'd actually love for people to understand is like, that is your gift. And then on the implementation side, that's where we really get to help you hone in on how are we going to reach some of those? Because, that's where businesses don't make as much as they should, or they get exhausting. And then people decide, I want to quit, or like, what's wrong with this? I'm burning out, because you're always trying to achieve something new. So on a fractional CFO side, it's like, I actually literally have the mission statement and those goals, and we go back to them every time. Is this achieving this goal? Is this achieving this goal? And when you're actually being realigned, you're right. Like, we're asking that question and people are like, oh yeah, that's kind of not. Like, I forgot that's where we're going. Okay. Like, this can wait till later.
Yeah. Because I think, again, we're kind of regulating the emotion to some extent. It's kind of checking in and saying, is that the decision you want to make? And not in a judgmental way, but in a way that's just serving the overall mission. And for those of you who are wondering and thinking, well, Staci, you and Shannon sound a lot like coaches. Do you identify that like we kind of transform into coaches in a lot of what we do?
So funny, years and years and years ago, when I had my accounting practice, I actually always said, I feel like I'm a coach. Then the coaching world kind of blew up. Like, I am not a coach. Furthest from a coach that you can find.
I want to be too. I don't want to use it, but I feel like it's true, right? Like I don't want to use the word though, because it's so overused.
Yes. So if you're asking me if I identify with somebody who helps you stay focused, who helps you achieve your goals, who pushes you out of your comfort zone a little bit, who has that big picture of the entire court, who helps you like make those decisions for a certain play, absolutely, like definitely 1000% a coach, somebody who's on your side helping you, achieve the goal, even when you've lost sight of it. Do I relate to the word coaching as it's used now? Absolutely not.
I know it's hard because I feel like it's overused and it's expanded into basically I help with anything. We've had an episode on this too that actually was really popular around the difference between coaching, consulting, and teaching and training, right? Like using the right word for what it is you actually do. Are you really coaching them through, or are you, consulting with them and telling them what to do? And it's a really interesting perspective. So I encourage you guys, listen to that episode with Chris Goodman. It was awesome. But going into that,
I actually am a certified life coach. I do not tell anybody that. But I decided at one point that I was like, hey, I feel like, I'm a coach. Like maybe I need to have that designation. And I actually went and took it. And the real way that the only like coaching, real coaching certification out there exists is basically that we just ask questions and you don't actually provide results for anybody. You're just asking them like, what do you think? What would work best? So from that perspective, I really don't resonate with that, because I would say like the consulting side where it's like, I'm providing experience, I'm providing expertise, I'm telling you what, industry standards are. I'm telling you what I've seen 100 other times. I'm applying concepts from one industry to another and like actually providing advice based on patterns and history and even what we can anticipate versus like, what do you think we should do?
I know, right? It's like, what do I pay you for? Why do you have 3 letters on your name, Shannon? If it matters what I think, I would say I'll make up a word and say coach-sultant because I feel like I'm a consultant that also, but it's not, we do come with the questions. And that's what I was going to ask you is from my perspective, at least what we do at Financial, I always say we don't bring the answers, we bring the questions to get the answers together. And that's a big factor. And that's actually a big thing I tell the team is that you're not responsible for bringing answers to the table. You're responsible for bringing the right questions. And then you guys will arrive at the right answer together. Because number one, that alleviates pressure that we're supposed to know everything about everybody and every industry and every business and what's good for them. Like we have a magic freaking crystal ball and we don't. We're human. The numbers can tell us so much, but the founder actually knows their business better than we do, as they should. So there's a lot of stuff that we have to arrive at together. But I do ask a ton of questions with regard to like, why does that concern you? How do you feel about that? Right? How does this impact this? There's relationship consideration. There's so much more than the numbers when it comes to making these bigger financial decisions. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that it's like almost a mix of, hey, here's what I see. Here's the things that stand out to me. Also, like, does that resonate with you? How do you feel about those decisions? The other piece is like that. How do you feel about it? The one thing I recognize is I can't carry any of this out. Like, I'm not going to be the one managing those people day to day.
Right.
It's going to be you as a business owner. So I need you to be on board. I need you to feel good about it. I need you to be invested. I need it to feel like it's doable for you in order to have those results that like, I'm here to help you get results. So that is a question that I ask like consistently. How does this feel to you? What do you think might stand in your way of doing that or accomplishing it or carrying that out?
And speaking of that, let's talk about accountability. What types of accountability tools do you provide your business owners in terms of making sure they actually do it and making sure they're fully committed to that?
You know what? I think the number one thing is just perspective. Most people do not have any way of tracking what it is that they said that they were going to do and then if they've carried it out. So just a simple process of like, hey, this is what the goal that we set was. Here's the actionable items on this. That is one of the biggest things. Having somebody else also involved when you're paying somebody to talk to you about this monthly, it's a really huge eye opener of like, wow, I promised that person I was going to do this and I haven't, whether, you know, it's your team that you promised, whether it's me that you promised. So those are the biggest ways that I think if I just start there, most of my clients do not need anything beyond that. They're already like, okay, that's it.
Yeah, I agree. It's like that implicit accountability of just having that person it's like the gym buddy who's waiting at 6 a.m. for you to show up. It's like, you're going to show up because you're going to feel bad if you don't. It's just that quick little thing. But I think it's also that kind of executive accountability, we call it, of that you're accountable to a peer, to someone else that's a trusted advisor. And that, you know, I jokingly say to folks like, you know, you don't have to take my advice, but you're paying a hell of a lot for it. And I tell them all the time, you're paying me for the advice for a reason. And that's not an ego thing. That is you entrusted me to take good care of your business and to help you reach this goal. And we have to try. We have to try the advice that I'm giving and prove to me it won't work. But before you fight me, prove to me it won't work. Go try it. It's like, I promise you, I've seen this before. That I bet this will work if you give it a try. And I think that some of the resistance that comes up, even with existing clients, not just for, you know, folks who are hiring us, the resistance is, you know, having that person that's kind of in their business along with them and helping them make those decisions where it's no longer just going ahead and doing it without talking to anyone. There's a bit of like, not permission, but there's a consultation I feel like there has to happen before they make major decisions now.
You know what? I have to say, I recognize that as well. Like even in my own business for everything that I do and the thousands of businesses that I've worked with, I still need somebody to, you know, put ideas past. And I don't have a business partner to do that with. And even if I did, I think sometimes like we lack clarity in our own businesses. So I think that level of whether it's like a coach or somebody that you're responsible to and somebody who really understands your level of business and can give you that perspective. Maybe it's people within a mastermind you're in, like, a business friend of yours that actually like that would understand your industry, things like that. Like having that person, no matter what it is, to be able to shoot things by. I think that's crucial in business.
Oh, I totally agree. Whether it's a peer, I say you have to have, I've said you have to be in quote unquote 3 masterminds, but what I mean is have a mastermind could be 2 people in my opinion. You have to have a consultative relationship with 3 groups of people, and that's your customers, your peers, and the people ahead of you.
Mm-hmm.
And the people ahead of you, I also mean, when I say ahead, it's not linear. I mean the people who know more about a certain subject than you do. So somebody who has more expertise than you in a certain area, somebody who's right alongside with you, holding each other's hands, rooting for each other, and then your customers, obviously, to tap into them. You should always be surrounded by your customers. And I think this is one of those things where instead of letting the ego take over and saying, well, I'm the business owner. I know what to do with my business. It's admitting where you may have a blind spot or a gap and looking to actually fill that, as opposed to accepting the identity that you just don't like looking at that, like the numbers.
Early on in my business, I would say like I can relate to most people, and it's almost like ego, but maybe more so fear of thinking like, okay, what is my position here if I don't know everything? And that was something that I will tell you, like, once I got over it, everything got so much easier. But we don't need to know everything. Like, literally, I was an accountant. I went to business school. You got the letters behind your name. And I thought if I just did really great accounting, that I would run a really great business. And very humbly learned a lot of lessons about, having a team of 10 and how to deal with the customers, and even just strategically, like what services we offered that had to be pared back, what terms of service we had, when people paid us. Like there was so much to it that I had to learn. And if I wasn't willing to admit that maybe I just didn't know, none of that would have happened.
Yeah, I agree. The first step is just acknowledging where the gaps might be and that they need closing in order to move forward, for sure.
Yeah. And, like you're good in your area, but it took time. Like it took time to build that skill set. So you can't expect yourself to also now know leadership and customer service and, sales, and you're still delivering services, and then also be, on the financial side, understanding that as well. So many people think that they're supposed to be great at everything in business. And it's like, guys, those are all like brand new skill sets. Like literally most of those are their own profession, and people study them for years to be great at them. And you're thinking like you step into business and open them, and day one, you're going to be good at all of them.
Right. Yeah, I definitely say, that was silly of me to get a 4-year degree and pass a 6-month exam if you can do this yourself.
Yeah.
But you're right. Go ahead and try that yourself. Yeah. But it's funny because, and I say that jokingly, right? Because you're right. There's entire degrees in each of these topics, guys.
I don't know marketing for a reason.
Yeah, right. So it's crucial that we understand that there's entire disciplines built around each of these dimensions. You're not expected to be a master of all of them. And that's why other people exist that went ahead and studied those or have their own businesses in those. And the more you can surround yourself with experts who see what you don't see, the better. So Staci, talk to me a little bit about do you have any stories of client successes or revelations or anything where maybe there was an unexpected outcome of working with you that you might be able to share?
Oh my gosh, I got 15 years of stories.
I know.
Well, besides the ones that we've kind of already talked about over the last few months, there's just so many. One, any industry where you're cash intensive and investing in assets, but I mean equipment or inventory, there have been so many stories where I've had success with that because we were able to like correctly plan what the need was going to be. One of the companies I worked with that way went from 400,000 in sales to 100 million in under 10 years. So wow. Massive success, but that took a lot of cash flow management. What else? Oh my gosh, like service-based businesses, breaking down, what they're working on, understanding what it really takes to provide a service that like the revelations where it was like, holy smokes, like we can't offer all this, or maybe we've got our team running all over the place. We need to streamline. There's just been so many. The one comment though that I get over and over and over and over again is that like, wow, you made this easy. wow, you took all the fear out of this. I thought this was going to be way harder than than it was. So
Yeah.
that would be, I think, like, no matter what the revelation was, because it's so unique for everybody, that's it, is that it is, like, I guess we just have a gift, and when you use that gift, it gets to be easy.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself. It's perfect. It's the idea that, it is overwhelming. It does instill a lot of fear in people, what we do. And I mean, like, candidly, it kind of sucks for us because we're like, no, it's actually way simpler and easier than you're making it out to be. But it's so hard to convince people of that and until they actually see it.
Yeah. I mean, there is so much shame with money in terms of, like, the narrative that even, what, when I was 18, I read this book, Start Late, Finish Rich, or something like that. And
Yes.
Smart Women Finish Rich. And the idea of, like, compounding, it almost, like, led to shame of, like, oh my gosh, how come I haven't been investing since I was 16? And, like, that's great advice. But, I invested in myself, and I turned out I had the same amount, like, same results, different way of getting there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, but the narrative then is like, we didn't do enough. We didn't save enough. We have debt. We, didn't invest in the right thing, without recognizing that, like, life is full of mistakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're always going to be learning our way around something new. And I think there needs to be an openness around money of, like, who cares how we got here?
Mm-hmm.
Let's just focus on where we're going. Because the more that we dwell on the past, like, the longer we're not getting towards the future that we want.
And to phrase that too, I mean, for every mistake that we encounter is also an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to change. It's an opportunity to become more open to this type of stuff and to, and to refocus as well. Because I think that when you make a mistake, you realize it was a mistake, but there's something to always take away from that so that you don't repeat it.
And I think sometimes it's not even realistic. Like, I had somebody, for example, that had a service-based business, and they hired some managers. They're like, I really want to expand. They hired 3 different managers. They thought, like, okay, this business is going to be this busy. And then, a year and a bit later, they were really struggling. They're like, this business, like, what should I do? And the first thing I said is, let go of all the managers. And there's, like, so much shame. And I'm like, this business isn't big enough for you to carry that kind of load. If we take a look at it, like, you actually can fulfill all these duties. They're not really doing anything in a day. And there was so much shame and, like, oh, I made the wrong decision. But if you rewound that, like, year and a bit and you looked at it, you would have thought, like, oh, if I don't hire these, what could happen? Like, maybe I'll be overworked. My customer service will fail because I'm not, giving the right amount of time to that. And so you only could know that decision a year and a half later because you tried it and it didn't get you to the goal. And you had to go through it to, like, kind of clear that idea out of your head of, like, maybe this is what I need to do. Otherwise, you could have had a different outcome and you'd have been like, I should have hired the managers.
Yeah, you only really find out what paths, like, you only call them mistakes after you've evaluated and you have all the data available to conclude it was a mistake. But in a weird way, you wouldn't have that data had you not made the decision.
Yeah.
So it's like they could have been living in a state of regret going, we should have hired those managers a year and a half later. It's like, what condition would you be in if you didn't? And there really isn't any point in speculating, in my opinion. I feel like you have to commit to the decision and pivot forward and not look back. Like, you have to say, okay, this is the position we're in right now. And this is the decision we have to make today without guilting yourself over decisions of the past. I think that's so powerful.
I think, though, the one improvement that, like, if we were really to hit it home is that we're looking at it strategically, right?
Yeah.
So when you and I are advising people, we're looking at the numbers. We're looking like, okay, how long, like, what are some targets? What do we have to see as results? Whereas a lot of small businesses that I deal with that, like, pre-working together, they just have a vague idea of what they want to see from something. They're like, oh, I hope this makes it easier. Well, what is easier? Are you reducing number of hours you're working? Like, there's not the clear, measurable strategy behind it. And that is one thing that I think, like, that could change. If you were thinking like, oh, I'm making a mistake, come up with the clear strategy. And then if you've done that, then there's no such thing as a mistake. It was something you tried and it just didn't get you there. And we're on to the next thing.
Yeah. And your goals will shift. right? Like your priorities will shift, your goals will shift, and you can't measure yesterday's decisions using today's measuring stick. It's just not going to work. I think that's such a powerful thing to keep in mind and something to remember as you look into, strategic insights from any type of professional. It's just key. So as we kind of wrap things up here, Staci, what are some ways that folks can learn more from you and get in touch with you if they want to find out more about what you do?
Yeah, I give a lot of free advice on Instagram, just like every other, what are we, like influencers now? Actually, I was joking with a friend yesterday. I'm like, I'm not that type of accountant, all those ones on TikTok.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram, also the Small Business School podcast, and we have a free resource called the Profit Playbook. Anybody who just wants to understand how to make more profit in their business and what that looks like.
All right. So utilize those tools, guys. We'll have a link in the show notes for the Profit Playbook. Staci, thanks so much for joining me today and having this conversation. I always love it.
Thanks, Shannon.